Hello, Commissioner Jackson.
Hi there, how are you?
Good, good. I'm just waiting for Ricardo and then I can turn it over to you all.
Thank you. Good to see you, Deacon.
Good to be here.
Good. Thank you so much. Lieutenant Hubbard, you got a new hairstyle. You doing something different with your hair?
It's a mess.
Is it a
It
bad
started
hair
off
day?
right, but then yeah, it's one of those days. Yeah, when I'm like pulling my hair out.
It's okay. Hello there, IG Phillips.
Hello.
Afternoon, good afternoon, great people.
Hello.
How about that? We're waiting for Ricardo so that Micah can transition and make him the host.
Yes.
But we will get started shortly.
Yes, ma'am.
Most of my people is right on time.
Right on time. That's right. We've already had introductions from both of my calls. Wilson spoke with Deacon Lyles and they're like, hey, how you doing? I've got two meetings happening at the same time.
Okay.
Is Deacon Lyles on the other one?
So Deacon Reginald Lyles is on this one, but Wilson Riles is on my other call. They started talking through my interface.
Okay.
No. One subject at a time. It's a wonderful thing that people know each other so well and have such respect.
Well, Micah, tell him.
So this is Deacon Reggie Lyles' family. So he was at my wedding when I was married before and all of that stuff. And our families go way back. So we've already had a full conversation.
Okay.
I'm so impressed with her.
Yeah, as are we. Well, I can speak for we OIG, the entire office. She's been amazing and fantastic. So such an amazing addition. So I'm excited.
Thank you. Okay, Ricardo, you see your host? You see it yet?
Oh, okay.
You see it?
Ricardo, are you able to take over the hosting?
She's got to unmute. There he goes.
I think so.
I think so. We want you to be sure. So we'll take a few minutes.
Thanks for being here as well, Lieutenant Hubbard. I feel like you're everywhere.
He is, but you know
My pleasure.
When he's that good, he should be everywhere.
No, thank you.
I completely
he has
agree.
been a training mogul. I assume that he's also excellent in police in policy.
Ricardo, you have it? Okay,
Yep.
perfect. All right,
Good, Ms. Micah.
Bye,
Thank
Micah.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you, Micah.
Okay,
Bye, Micah.
Okay, so we are waiting for the chair, but we will wait one more minute because I just sent her a message asking her if she's joining us. And then we'll go ahead and get started. And what I'd like for everybody to do is literally, yes, introduce themselves and why they are either interested in the racial profiling ad hoc, or that you were voluntold, or whatever that scenario is. But would love to hear from everyone. I know all of y'all, but you all may not know each other, or some may, Oh, all right, Michelle. Okay.
I think everybody know everybody.
Everybody know everybody?
Everybody.
Okay. Okay, so she has not responded. I presume that she will join us, but we will go ahead and move forward because I want to be mindful of your time. I don't know what everybody's day was like, but look, I know I've been there. So would you all like to introduce yourselves, or do you want to skip introductions? I want to be appropriately thoughtful when I'm using people's time. So if you have something to share about why racial profiling is important or critical, or are you just curious, I'm good.
You want to start, Chair Emeritus?
Okay, so yes, for the last 6.5 years, we have been talking around racial profiling, and thank you primarily to the Bay brothers who have said, that there is no focus that should be more, have more attention paid to it than racial profiling, because it is the theme under which we have the problems, right? or have had the problems. And I know that we're beginning to work those out, stopping numbers are going down and all that, but it is a function that we have not acknowledged in a formal way. I understand we don't have an MOR for racial profiling, and we should, and maybe there's other things that we can do later, but I wanted to ensure, at least in my last 6 months of being a commissioner, that we got this done and got it done right. So there you have it. Who popcorn? I'm giving it to Michelle. Oh, Ricardo, go ahead, baby.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ricardo Garcia Costa. During my day job, I'm a director of community peace at Communities United for Restorative Youth Justice. We do a lot of violence intervention work real closely. Actually, we have a team that does on-call work with the ceasefire units and does violence interruption work. So very familiar on that end. For a while, I've done this work, both in San Francisco and in Oakland for about 20 years now. Originally from Oakland, and just a really quick anecdote about my background. If you go back a good 30, 35 years ago, I may or may not have been involved in the underground cannabis industry in Oakland, which got me into some trouble back then. And I was really smart because being Latino, Mexican, son of immigrants, Mexican-American, I was also realized that unlike my Black folks that I kick it with, I could be white passing, right? And I quickly realized that depending on what kind of car I drove, how I carried myself, what kind of glasses I put on, right? How I combed my hair, I could drive right by police officers loaded with a bunch of legal shit, and they would just be like, "How you doing, sir?" And I'd be like, "How you doing, sir?" I could even smoke a joint in front of them and be like, "How you doing, sir?" And then my folks that I was growing up with in the neighborhood, I grew up in North Oakland, School Street and Coolidge in the 30s. And I realized that folks from the African-American community and my folks that I was growing up with weren't afforded that type of latitude, right? I was quickly identified as, oh, let Rick run it because they don't pull him over. So there is direct lived experience that I have growing up in Oakland, seeing the whole trajectory of good policing and bad policing, how we could use, how at that time I was using my own street knowledge to use racial profiling for my own benefit, right? And so now working with families, you know, it's a whole lifetime later, 30 years later, working with families, running programs, building organizations. I also see how some of my frontline staff get pulled over and questioned, right? And they have to, you know, provide their identification, and the more we communicate with OPD and get our guys out there, those relationships start to build. But initially, right, there's these perceptions, whether it's implicit bias or where it's just straight, you know, folks that are like doing straight racial profiling, right? I've also had the opportunity throughout the trajectory of my career, when I was with the city of Oakland, to do implicit bias and procedural justice trainings with OPD and with those very same ceasefire units. And it was, in that sense, was also a kind of deeper level of racial profiling, because it was the way customer service was kind of engaged within community, right? You know, for lack of better terms. I was doing a lot of work around homicide families, and it was very clear that a homicide family that was robbed in Montclair or an affluent neighborhood would get a lot more information, whether it be from investigations, whether it be a call back, right? Just the way they were treated as a citizen that should have never have to go through that type of situation was different than a mother in the flatlands that lost her son due to group and gang violence, right? And that mother, so her, you know, that could have been a high profile target. It could have been somebody that did a lot of damage in the community, but to that mother, that was her baby, right? And she deserved to be talked to with dignity and respect and with all the forthright information that the same mother or the same victim up in an affluent neighborhood would, right? So I've seen all these little anecdotes of racial profiling, how they really play out on the day-to-day basis. And regardless of a box being checked or folks like coming up with good policy, and I applaud everybody that's been working really hard around the table to be able to move this forward, I'm really interested on how that practice looks on the day-to-day basis in our communities. And so that's why I'm here today. Should have never gave me an intro, Miss Regina. You know, I like to talk, but yeah, that's, I'm gonna go ahead and take a step back from here, and I'm gonna pass it to Mr. Reginald Lyles. And I've heard a lot about you, sir, and I've never had a chance to meet you, so pleasure to meet you.
Well, we got a lot in common. I am also from North Oakland, but around 56 between Market and Genoa. And so I'm a bush rider, and
Me too. That was my AAUs. I was bush rider rebel, baby.
And so I spent a lot of time at that park and in that neighborhood. I'm also an ex-police officer and an ex-commander. And I was an acting chief for a very short period of time. And I've worked in Berkeley for 20 years, and I worked in the East Bay, in Novato for 10 years. So I have 30 years in law enforcement. I worked in the mayor's office, Mayor Gene Kwan at the time. And I worked for Assemblyman Sandre Swanson when he was in office for a couple of years. I also was executive director at Piedmont Gardens for then the American Baptist Homes of the West for about 7 years. So I had actually 2 facilities I had to run. So it took a lot of so I understand management. I still love law enforcement. I love law enforcement officers. I don't think it has to be biased policing. I think constitutional policing is possible. You just have to have folks not being lazy about it and being honest about it. So I'm a deacon at Allen Temple Church, Baptist Church, deep East Oakland, and I've been there for 40 years. So when the Queen Regina calls, we learned years ago, decades ago, you answer. And so
You are precious, Deacon Lyles. Thank you.
Well, that's how we feel about you, and you know it.
Thank
And because she earned that.
Thank
She
you.
earned that.
Thank you very much.
So I'm here, and I hope I've worked with the Lieutenant Hubbard before. He's a smart man, and he gets it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see his face.
Thank you. Thank you. Me too. So we've got a first class group here, even if we're missing a couple people. So it sounds like Deacon, you popcorning to Lieutenant
yes.
Hubbard, and we
Michelle's the only one left. Oh no, Lieutenant Hubbard's there too.
Just stand by on her own. Go ahead, Lieutenant Hubbard. Thank you for spending your time with us this evening. I know it's already been a long day.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Brian Hubbard, and I am the commander of the Office of Internal Accountability. Most of you were familiar with me when I was in training, and was in training for over a decade. So I'll keep my speech short here, but you've probably heard me say this a lot, that we have a lot of generic training, and we do have racial profiling training that is mandated by post. It's the same thing. It's the same thing that I saw my entire career. One of the best trainings, that I've ever experienced, on this topic was Dr. Eberhardt's training on implicit bias, and I thought it was fantastic just because she provided a different perspective. And I we still have a contract with her, and I hope that we can go back to that. But our current training program now regarding racial profiling and our policy just needs to be updated, and I certainly hope that I can help with that initiative.
Thank you very much. Brian, would you tell us how long you've been with OPD and maybe what neighborhoods you grew up in, or if you ever lived in Oakland? I always like to see, kind of who's touching the spaces that are most important.
Yeah, I started my career here when I was 18 years old, actually. I graduated high school in San Leandro, and I came here as a cadet. So I've been here since 1996, but a sworn police officer for now 25 years. And I have no desire to leave until I retire. I feel like this is my home now. I don't live in Oakland, but my wife reminds me that I spend more time here at work than I do at home. So you all are my family, and I very much appreciate all of you.
Thank you very much for answering those additional questions, and also the information around Dr. Everhart's training. That was very important. So we will popcorn to the IG, last but not nearly least.
I thank you, Chair Emeritus, and I am just overwhelmed with excitement. This is a phenomenal group of people that I feel like is passionate about this topic. My name is Michelle Phillips. I'm the Inspector General. I am not mainly here, but I think this is really, really, really important. I'm a former correctional officer, and understanding and seeing the lack of equity in treatment. I'm also from Baltimore City. I lived a few different places. I was raised by a single Black man and witnessed a lot of unnecessary treatment, just because of the way that he looked. And as a little Black girl, seeing that their dad is their hero, and then having to get those conversations that some of my white counterparts don't have to have. We all know those conversations when we sit down and you don't do this and you don't do that. Um, when I'm literally being judged because of the color of the skin I was born with and nothing else. So I think it's really, really important to educate, educate, and hold people accountable. I tell people all the time, I'm an accountability practitioner. I know that Lieutenant Hubbard and I have had very frank, open, and honest conversations about this topic. I appreciate him being willing to listen and to hear and just be honest and take it on the chin. He'll be like, Michelle, I don't know why we don't have that. I don't know why we didn't do that. Okay, we need to start working on that. I've also sat through, and I want to thank Lieutenant Hubbard for the opportunity for me and my staff to sit through CPT training as well as transition class training. I've sat in OPD's bias based policing training, was very underwhelmed. I provide my feedback all the time to Lieutenant Hubbard, whether he wants it or not. Uh, so I'm happy that he's here because these conversations have been moving forward. Again, I'm not from Oakland, but I walk around Oakland like it's a second home. It's nothing but a baby Baltimore to me. I'm from the hood. I am who I am, and I'm comfortable in my skin, but I also understand the nuances that come with people and their own biases. As a person, we all have biases, but as a police officer or people with authority, we have to be able to have situational and emotional awareness to understand if things are triggering, particularly people being in Black spaces or minority spaces where you cannot be objective, there needs to be accountability in that work. So I'm a policy person, Ricardo, but to your point, there has to be intersectionality with policy and practice. We have to put, our money where our mouth is. And to Lieutenant Hubbard's point, we can train all day, but if it's not in your heart to do the right thing, then being a police officer is not for you. And there needs to be mechanisms to ensure that we identify those folks via policies and fair, firm practices to make sure that we weed those people out. Oakland deserves the best law enforcement officer possible. So I'm here to help do the work. I'm super excited. We already started with some work and some conversations. I also want to just acknowledge and thank Chair Meredith Jackson. I'm here because of her, because she saw something in a young Black professional from Baltimore, giving me the opportunity to help and move Oakland in a great, wonderful direction. So I know she's at her tail end of her tenure and she'll be termed out, but I'm not a Miss Regina baby in the EOYDC sense, but she's definitely a mother figure to me here and has helped to guide me and mold me and put me in spaces and places to do amazing work for a city that I now call.
But she's my baby. Because Ricardo did such a great job with introduction, I'm just going to add maybe 30 more seconds. Having run the East Oakland Youth Development Center for 27 years, having been a resident of Oakland for 55 of my 61 years, I have had the greatest exposure to police, but my exposure really started out with all the community people, all the people that I knew that grew up and went to police departments. And so we were familiar with the folks that were riding along or walking or, doing all the things. And over the years, things have changed. A lot of that familiarity, the knowledge of Oakland, the comfort in Oakland, people have retired or left, and some of that hasn't translated. So when the opportunity came, I went to Libby as soon as the commission was approved. I had actually been talking to her about it when I said I thought we needed it, and she said we didn't, but whatever. Anyway, I thought that while I didn't know a whole lot about policing, that maybe some of my experiential learning and maybe the experience of some of my kids and some of my families that I served at EOIDC was educational enough for me to understand that threading the needle, the relationship between police and community, I knew that it used to be pretty good. I'm not talking about all the writer stuff, but there were trusted entities. There was knowledge about good places that worked well with young people or seniors or what have you. And those were trusted voices. The trusted voices have given way. And so now we're trying to, transition the approach by police officers to not be as scary and to be fully informed of the areas that they police for the betterment of everyone. So I am delighted that the chair gave me the responsibility to lead this policing ad hoc, racial policing ad hoc. We may be joined from time to time by Darlene Flynn. She couldn't make it tonight in the Office of Race and Equity, but I'll be talking with her and, we get some heads up. So before we go to, I had actually asked, I don't know how often we're going to get Michelle, even though she loves everybody. So maybe we'll get her all the time because we brought the A1 team. But I know that she just recently reviewed the M19 policy. And while the policy itself is not public, so I couldn't share it, she's going to give us an overview. It's public now?
And so the current policy is public.
Okay.
My report and analysis of the policy review is not public.
Okay. Okay, that's perfect. And then I want y'all to know, if I drop my head, I am feverishly taking notes, okay? Because I want to make sure that we capture what an MOR template looks like, because I don't know, that we look at updating the policy that you just referenced, Lieutenant Hubbard, and then we take a look at where it is that we want to go. And hopefully we'll be able to answer some of those questions before we end this meeting today. But I want to, unless anybody has any questions, I want to go ahead and give the floor to Michelle to give us an overview on M19. And I didn't include it in the policy because I think I was confused about the exposure. So we'll make sure that you have a copy of M19 following this meeting. Is everybody good with that?
Look, I'm gonna put Lieutenant Hubbard to work because every time I throw something out, he pulls it and grabs it. So Lieutenant Hubbard, if you don't mind grabbing M19 as it stands now and sending it to everybody, please. Lieutenant Hubbard and I actually work very, very closely together. We have regular meetings. And I've been talking to him about this. What prompted the OIG's review of M19, as Chair Meredith Jackson said previously, was really the Bay matters. And their concern around bias-based policing and racial profiling. So when I finally had a bit of time, I took a look at it. I was like, gosh, this was published in 2004. So now there has been special orders. So special orders, and Lieutenant Hubbard can speak a little bit more to this as well, are kind of placeholders that add supplemental information to an already established departmental general order. It is intended to be there for a short-term fix. So when the policy is completely revised, that those provisions that are created by the special order are then implemented into the departmental general order. There had not been an exhaustive review of the entire DGO as it stands for several years. So as this happened, California Penal Code had changed. The way that we classify protected classes had changed over time. Gender identity, color, definitions of disabilities, both physical and mental disabilities. Things had evolved over time. We're talking about 2004. We now have gender neutral restrooms. And there are things that are being, folks that are being classified in different ways, non-binary pronouns and things of that nature, which means that even though there may be a practice in OPD, we may be training folks to be a little bit more sensitive. There is no policy that would have held them accountable for not doing. And that's one thing that I had observed a lot. We train them to do this, yes, but there is no policy to hold them accountable based on the disciplinary metrics. So we went through the policy, very lengthy policy, and we made several recommendations. Many of them really had to do with bringing the policy into alignment with the language that is in the California Penal Code, as well as being very clear, specific, and intentional on definitions. What is the definition of color? So that there is no ambiguity. What is the definition of gender identity? What is the definition of gender expression? What is the definition of a protected class based on the law or any other protected categories? Just flushing it all out so that there's no need to go back and forth like, well, I didn't understand that this is what color meant, or, well, that's not what I think. It's very clear in what it is. We also made recommendations for there to be a glossary, because in some different some different areas, certain words mean different things. We need everybody to interpret the language the same way words have meaning. Set clear timelines and deadlines for reporting of incidents. If you see something, say something. I think we all know that there is a responsibility for officers to report. So what does that timeline look like? Must you report immediately? Is it by the time you enter shift? Is it within 24 hours? If we just leave it open, if you see a fellow police officer engage in racial bias behavior, and you come a year or two later and it's open, well, it doesn't say how long I have, they just say that I have to. These are accountability mechanisms to make sure that we have internal controls to hold officers and employees accountable when these behaviors are observed. We also made recommendations to align OPD's operating procedures with the policy. Make it very clear what the purpose of the policy is, the intent of the policy, so that everybody who reads this policy understands there is a torrid history surrounding bias-based policing and violations of civil rights and civil liberties at the hands of Oakland police officers. We are working towards, and I want to commend the police department for working towards these police reforms to ensure that there are mechanisms to hold people accountable should they engage in this again. But we can't forget where we came from, because that is the reason why that we are elevating and moving forward. So there must be a clear purpose outlined in this policy when they first start. And this is how it is, and so those are kind of very high level recommendations that I provided. It's quite a lengthy report. We did quite a bit of research. We looked at other police departments. We reviewed Department of Justice white papers, as well as research papers and recommendations. We spoke to quite a few subject matter experts in this field. We also spoke to our subject matter experts in the city of Oakland and our disabilities office to ensure that the language that we were talking about and using was very relevant. We spoke with Director Flynn and Race and Equity as well to help to inform our recommendations in this work. And we also spoke to LaTonda Simmons, who is the Assistant City Administrator with homelessness, because we don't want to criminalize the unhoused population either. So taking all of these factors into consideration, understanding that there is a lot, but all of our recommendations are to ensure that there is constitutional policing. It is not to give an officer an excuse not to enforce the law. And we made that very clear. You still must do your job, but in an equitable, bias-free manner in order to maintain public safety.
That's a mouthful. Thank you very much. Does anyone want to ask any questions or underscore any of what they just heard from Michelle? And Michelle, do you have a sense of when your review may become public, or will that just kind of?
So we sent out the document to both OPD as well as the Police Commission on February 9th. I like to give 30 business days, and that means that we should be getting it back March 25th.
Okay.
March 25th, the responses are due from both OPD and the Police Commission, I'm going to say.
And historically, because I just don't know, has OPD been able to meet those the expectation of time response?
Absolutely. So one
I
thing
know
that
the commission haven't, so go ahead.
So one thing that we started to pivot, and I have been working with Deputy Chief Wong and Lieutenant Hubbard on this, is to ensure that we have comprehensive responses. Before, I was sending reports to just the commission, and it was difficult because, you know, that subject matter expertise and understanding isn't there. So I talked to Lieutenant Hubbard and spoke to DC Wong, and I was like, you know, I really would like a response from OPD to see how you feel about these recommendations. If there is an implementation strategy, what alignment would you need as far as timeline goes to implement any new policy revisions, as well as any new trainings? And then if there is an implication to the disciplinary metrics, right? The police commission wouldn't know that. So allowing the police department to kind of take a look at that. Yes, we're in alignment with this IG, or actually, we've been doing this and that, and we've been working on this. And sometimes that's what OPD will say. Thanks for bringing this to our attention. We kind of already knew this, and we're working on it, and this is what we're doing. And that's okay, because then I can utilize my platform to ensure that public and community knows. So once we get those documents, those responses, my process is I package it up, make sure that there's no names that are confidential, that cannot be released to the public, or any information that cannot be released to the public. And if it is, redact, or just make sure that I have a public facing report, send it out to my listserv and put it on all social media. Definitely will make sure I send it to this entire ad hoc so you guys have it.
Thank you very much for that overview. My question to you is, based upon your underwhelmed feeling about OPD training, I think it was around implicit bias, is that correct?
Yeah, they have a racial bias training
Racial
that
bias.
I sat through, I think maybe 2 or 3 times.
And you have given feedback, as I'm understanding. So Lieutenant Hubbard, does that mean that all the feedback has already been in place, or how have you responded to the feedback, and or will there be a more robust response following the March 25th date?
Yes, I think I'm gonna save the plan and my response to that for the response to the report. And the reason why is because racial profiling, it's one of those legislative mandated trainings, but we have to follow postscript. They literally give us a lesson plan, and we have to teach to that lesson plan. We can't step outside of that. But that's only for what post mandates. So what I hope to do is take this and develop our own training that would be in addition to what post mandates, and then therefore we can use all stakeholders to develop a lesson plan that works for us. And
May I add something to that?
Please.
Okay, so the post-mandated training is controlled by law enforcement trainers and thinkers. They don't only use law enforcement officers, they use professors and stuff from various colleges and criminologists, etc. But they're in the line of thinking like in the middle of where law enforcement is. So they make sure that the training is at a level where there's a way to get around it. There's a way to not to be held accountable. I think it was best stated by Judge William Orrick when he said that the Oakland Police Department's culture has a culture of trying to ensure that no one is held accountable. Now, this is the federal judges over the consent decree. And so you federal judges don't make up stuff, and every word is judiciously, is stated. So we do have policy. I think Lieutenant Hubbard is right on point when he says, we got to get other stakeholders and then produce a training that's appropriate to what we want taught. You can teach more, but you don't get paid for it. That's why it's not done. If you're going to do something in and above post-training, City of Oakland's going to have to pay for that. So you see why folks don't do it, because we can't pay the overtime for people to be off the streets, to go through the training, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what a group like this ought to be thinking about, projecting the obstructions and how to work around it. And then secondly, I really appreciate what Michelle said about, I think you used the phrase, it's notoriously
Horrid.
Horrid, yeah, horrid. And the history of Oakland Police Department has been horrid. It has been horrid, absolutely ridiculously horrid. Now, when you say that, then you get folks within the department, of course, folks part of the union, and then their advocates who are in the citizenry who said, okay, you hate police, or number one, number two, you want to defund the police, or all of that BS that gets in the way from making the absolute allegiance to that you can have unbiased policing, you can have constitutional policing, and like Michelle said, you can do your job and not abuse people. It can be done. If you make a mistake, we'll deal with that. But it can be done. It can be done. So when I'm trying to bring people up to speed, I just ask them to read Writers Come Out at Night. Don't read the whole book. Just read chapter 9. That's all I want you to read. Just read chapter 9. Just understand what the officers were doing, how long they were doing it, who they were abusing, and what happened to them because of what they were doing. And you'll find out that there's 19 officers involved with writing bad warrants, lying to judges, serving bad warrants on folks' homes, arresting them, bringing them down on confidential informants' lies, knowing that they were lies. And the principal people involved, one of them left the department, who's ended up at UCPD, and the other ones ended up being a chief of police in Modesto somewhere. That's what we're dealing with. That's what we're dealing with. So this is not just about writing great policy, because writing great policy, any second year law student or first year law student ought to be able to write great policy. Mm-hmm. Great policy. But the issue is, how do you make people adhere to the policy when you got sergeants, lieutenants, captains directing people how to avoid being held accountable? And so I hope in your policy, Michelle, you make the statement that, adherence to this policy doesn't mean you cannot do absolutely constitutional policing.
I want to thank you for that, Deacon. I also want to ask a different question. I definitely want Lieutenant Hubbard to weigh in. I recognize that Post, they still teach the carotid restraint, even though the city of Oakland says we're not doing that anymore, that they still teach the traditional ways of policing. And I'm wondering if part of our response to policy should or should not be a letter to post about some of the things that we've seen and some of the things that we are doing to eradicate, some of the runaround, or if that's a dead dog. I mean, part of me feels like tradition, you have to know what it was in order to change it, but there's some stuff that just won't move. And so I'm not sure if this is also an avenue within the context of our policy upgrades, trainings, and all the rest of that to address post. It's just a thought. You all sit with it.
Sure.
Lieutenant Hubbard?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And Post does, they do say that they want more feedback, and they do have avenues for us to do that. So to answer the carotid question or comment, we don't teach that. Post doesn't recognize that either. So it's banned in the state. So they did get rid of it. Yeah, they have.
Great.
And we got rid of it in our academy, obviously, which is great. But yes, they also have a lot of committees. Post does, and one of them is updating learning domains. So if we identify things in the current racial profiling learning domain, we absolutely can invite people to attend that, and we can be at the table with them to update and make better their training that is very old and needs to be updated, but also best practices.
That's outstanding. Thank you. And I posited that particular question your way, but I also recognize that you may want to be responsive to both IG and Deacon's comments.
Everything was well said, and I agree. And I think this goes back to our discussion, not only for racial profiling, but excited delirium. I really would like to put on a class on the history of policing. And to Deacon Lyle's point, I read The Writers Come Out at Night twice, and my favorite chapter was actually the history of Oakland and a brief history of policing. And I think a lot of our new officers need to know that, especially racial profiling, because they can give you a generic definition, but they don't know the history behind it. And so maybe we can parlay this into something bigger to make it worth our while to talk about the history and how we got to where we are today.
Excellent. Thank you for that recommendation.
In addition, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, and then we'll have Commissioner Garcia speak. Go ahead.
Well, and here's the other thing culturally that that law enforcement will be better if they could just get over themselves. You don't have to just learn from other police officers. That is absolutely ridiculous, because what they want to teach is what they already know. They don't want to hear anything innovative or new unless it can emanate from them and benefits them. So to get out of that attitude, to get out of that, we had to fight to get Jennifer Eberhardt to come, and she had she was a MacArthur Fellow.
Yeah.
We had to fight Oakland over that. So you have to fight them on every issue. If some intelligentsia is coming from anything other than some Caucasian, conservative, law enforcement connected person from like Lake County or Santa Barbara or Los Angeles, San Diego County, or one of those isolated places where there's no diversity. In itself is fear. So who can teach them out of that? It's got to be the thinkers who have looked at these questions and said, consider this. So there's a whole list of books that, if it was a way we can get supervisors, I wouldn't say train every officer because it's too expensive, but supervisors. Look, if you want to be a sergeant in Oakland Police Department, then you ought to have read, it should be mandatory reading Writers Come Out at Night. All the other stuff about law enforcement and what do you do in a search, blah, 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 you could always get that. But who are we? What have we been? And what do we want to be? So you got to know from whence you came. You got to say, this is what we want to get away from. And so who has written, what book has documented that in a way that's readable and precise? Is that Writers Come Out at Night. And the only reason why I say chapter 9, because when I recommend it to people, even people who've been on commissions like this, all of them have said no. No, I'm not reading that. I'm not reading that. I'm talking about former judges. I'm talking about folks who I thought was really cared, former mayors. Man, you haven't read that? Well, if you don't read it, all you want to know is what you want to implement. I'm a minister and I'm in this community so many years, but you ain't read that book. So you have to get folks to read something that is maybe not flattering, right?
No, really good point. And after Commissioner Garcia Acosta responds, I actually want to ask Lieutenant Hubbard, because I think that there are, you know, some police officers that think that the accuracy is not there. And we know that probably 90%, but, you know, I just wonder what.
I lived it.
Yeah, well, look, we
lived
understand
it. So
that. We understand that.
I ain't gonna let nobody tell me it's not there. I lived it. I saw it. I witnessed it. I policed in it. I saw it get done. I tried to stop it from my perspective. So, you know, they know. Oh, it's that way, and it's still that way in a lot of regards. And then there's a there's a book that was written, I think, 2015 by a theologian, Black female womanist theologian. Her name is Kelly. Lieutenant Hubbard, you need to read this. Her name is Kelly Brown Douglas. She is probably one of the foremost scholars in the country. She's a mother and a wife. Okay. And the book is Black Bodies and the Justice of God. Black Bodies by Kelly Brown Douglas. In fact, Lieutenant Hubbard, if you send me your email or put it in the chat, because I teach this stuff, and I will send you an excerpt, a 20-page excerpt that I want you to read, and it may help you how to get folks understand why folk of color act the way they act.
Would you mind, Deacon, sending it to all of us so that
I'll send it to you right now.
Beneficiaries of the information? Thank you. And to that point, there are probably a bunch of books. I wondered, and I'm still coming back to you, Commissioner Garcia Acosta, if we should pull out, you know, John Burris's Black and Blue. I mean, there are a bunch of books.
That's how you get another reflection. Now, if when I was going up the chain, you know, I tried to figure out where was the next wave of innovation in law enforcement. You know, I was there when it was community policing was coming out. You know, so I wanted to read everything. So when my sergeants and lieutenants examinations came up and interviews came up, I sounded so on top of everything. So it makes sense to me that if you're a young person want to be in charge and want to make the money, want to someday be a chief, you have to, even if you don't agree with it, you have to at least know it and know the nomenclature. So are you guys going to put your emails in the chat, or how are you going to do this? Or should I send it to Michelle? And Michelle send it out?
I just emailed you already. I
You
responded.
okay.
I responded.
Right. I'm done.
And
thank you, Ricardo.
No, don't be done. But we're going to Commissioner Garcia Acosta. Really appreciate what you just said. And Reggie, you can send it to Michelle. You can send it to me. You know, and Michelle has given Lieutenant Hubbard's email. I'm hoping that we're all on one email. But if that's not the case, I will make sure of it tonight when I try to synthesize and summarize what this meeting
We
is
are.
about. We have it?
We are, and Lieutenant Hubbard emailed both commissioners as well as myself, and I responded to Lieutenant Hubbard's email and added Deacon Lyles on it, so we have an email chain with everyone.
I should have known that you somewhere in the efficiency of the process. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm hoping that you still remember what you were going to say, Commissioner Garcia Costa. Appreciate your patience.
Absolutely. Little off topic, but definitely appreciate those comments, Mr. Laws. I mean, I think, I'm over here writing down the names of these books, so definitely need to do our homework and on my end as well as a new commissioner. But also agree with you, right? If you love the city, if you love the work that you do, like, you're going to challenge yourself to be better and to not make it about what you think you already know, but challenge yourself to listen to other perspectives. And so really appreciate those comments. The question I had, because I printed out the M19 real fast and was kind of just reading through it real fast. And this is more just my own ignorance and just kind of learning all of this stuff. But when it comes to stop data collection, I know at one point in policing, like, I don't know, maybe like 2021 or something, there was a lot of stuff coming out around how Latinos were being misidentified as white and that there was like data reporting. And I'm wondering, like, where is OPD with those practices, right? And then as we look at the term Latino, right, and I think this may be a more training thing as well too, is really looking at the broad spectrum of Latinos that are represented here in Oakland, and how officers are having the training and really just the knowledge to be able to differentiate between the differences. Because if you look at me, that's a 6'4" Chicano American. I was born in Oakland, right, versus a 5'5" immigrant from Guatemala, right? We have very different cultures, right? Even though there's a lot of similarities too, right? And so, and I say that for two reasons. One, because I'm just wondering about the stop data, right? And how that's collected. And, because I know at one point there was this thing that a lot of Latinos were being labeled as white, right? So like it was messing up the numbers and the data. So that's my first question, is just kind of where we're at with that. And then secondly, the other point I was, I guess there's a section on here, section 14, about the racial profiling program manager and some of the duties that they have and meeting with community groups. And I'm wondering if there's some Latino or even indigenous, because we've seen a big influx of indigenous populations from Central America, that even language capacity and linguistically may not even speak Spanish, right? And so the nuance of their plight and with the experiences that they're facing in Oakland, right? It would really be great to add maybe some organizations on this list. I don't know if it's still possible, or at some point just connecting IG to some of those organizations as well to actually include in this policy. So those are just kind of some of my initial thoughts around that stuff. Obviously, you could see Latino representation matters for me, and so I'm going to be, definitely asking some of these questions as well too, and how we show up in some of the stop data.
And it sounds, Commissioner, like when we respond by March 25th, which we're going to need to talk amongst ourselves on the commission, make sure that everybody has reviewed it so that we can give feedback that is not one-off, that it's reflective of the entire commission. But I think that your suggestion here, no doubt, Michelle will be researching that and, getting ready to make some updates.
I'm smiling because I know Lieutenant Hubbard is like some of the things in the recommendations, and him and I have talked about some different things. So I appreciate you, Commissioner Garcia Costa, for acknowledging and identifying certain things, because I pulled out a few things. So I'm just waiting for Lieutenant Hubbard.
I think we're all waiting for you, Lieutenant Hubbard.
I want to answer the question of stop data. We still collect stop data. Now it's electronic. The unfortunate thing with stop data is that we're limited to so we're limited to the output of the data, as in what does California want? And unfortunately does not get too deep into the different ethnicities. So I'll start with that. And then second of all, yes, we do teach to discover the facts and not assume. So an officer should not be just looking at someone and assuming their ethnicity. It needs to come in the form of documentation if they have it, like a driver's license or ID, or ask. There's nothing wrong with asking, and we encourage that. And so and California does and has changed its laws recently. I don't have it in front of me now about what an officer has to do upon stopping someone. So, for example, this is one thing I'm definitely going to update in this policy. Is It's always been a pet peeve of mine when an officer does not identify themselves and explain the reason why the person is being stopped. Instead of they're just demanding their driver's license and registration. So we're going to change that. And so there's other things that California does mandate. So we can certainly dig deeper into this, but unfortunately, we're only limited to stop data, at least of what California requires.
Because that would cost more, correct?
It's not so much the cost; it's about data collection. So if we collect more data, then it's going to have implications on the back end when we start pulling reports. Let's say it goes into Excel and we start pulling these reports. So California wanted it to be detailed, but not too detailed to where it becomes there's just too much data for them to house. Yeah.
I think you're on mute. Go ahead.
Are Latinos considered Hispanic, or like what? How does that show up in that data that you guys provide to the state?
Yeah, it's just Hispanic. Yeah, yeah. And the other thing, and we can go deeper into this, is our report writing. We have a very old report writing system, and so when you have a victim, let's say, who's Hispanic, that's it. I mean, it's just like, hey, and then it doesn't. I'm not allowed to input anything beyond what the database allows me to put in.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And the system is how old, Lieutenant Hubbard?
Oh man, early 2000s. We are updating it. It actually goes in lines with another request from IG Phillips about NIBRs, about how we report crime. So I would say in 2025, we're looking at a brand new report writing system, which is long overdue. It will definitely make us more efficient, but also I think we can custom build it so we can put in things that we want just to, to collect more data, but also get a true read on our community that we serve.
Well, thank you. That's exciting to hear.
Can I jump in real quick?
Please, please.
So to that point, I'm sorry, y'all might hear me call Lieutenant Hubbard Chief, because he was deputy chief acting deputy chief for a while. And in my head, I keep wanting to call him chief. So
it's okay. You can promote him all you want tonight.
I'm gonna put it. I love him in the position. With that said, I know that there has been some reporting about the new records management system and other forms to city council committees and things of that nature. I think that is a huge move in the right direction for OPD, particularly with data transparency and data collection. I don't know if you all have reported, at least in summary, about this transition that is so new and exciting to the commission at all. And if you have not, maybe at the next reporting or even with the response to NIBRs, maybe talk about that, because I was over the moon when I heard about it, but I'm kind of a nerd in that way. I don't know if anybody else could truly appreciate the need for a new RMS.
Well, I mean, one, I appreciate your saying that. And two, I think that the majority of people that get that information are typically the chair and or the vice chair, depending upon the conversations they're having with the chief or in other spaces. So it still might not roll all the way downhill. So it would be very much appreciated, because it's like, we don't know what we don't know. And when you're making systems, transition, like Michelle was saying, that typically is addressing several different issues, right? Lieutenant Hubbard?
Definitely. Yeah, it would definitely put us in the right direction. Yeah.
I think that the commission would be very excited to hear that. I'm sure the community would be very excited to hear that. I mean, it's like any technology, laptop, 4 years out and it's like too old. And now we're talking about something that's 20 years out. Ancient, right? Yeah, and I would imagine that officers are very frustrated as well, so you all will get excited too. Okay.
Yes.
Are there any other questions coming up for people? Okay, I did send, oh, go ahead, Michelle.
Sorry, just real quick question for Deacon Lyles. I just want to acknowledge that the email that I have is correct and that you did receive the email.
Yeah, I did get it.
Okay.
I'm trying to put everybody's name in here and send this off right now. I did get it.
Great. Just wanted to make sure that we were all good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, because I sent to a couple of bad emails several times just for announcing this meeting. So thank you. I wonder, given the conversation around M19, the overview, when Deacon Lyles and I were talking, early in February, and we were talking about some of the work that's going on across the country, immediately he just rolled off, links to several things. And obviously I sent you all the links. I know that perhaps we are maybe most excited about what's happened in New York because it's most recent. But I'm not sure if people had a chance to take a look at those links, if they had any questions about it, if they wanted to make any comments on it. Obviously, when we're looking at doing this work, we want to take a look at best practice. And so long as people are coming up with great ideas that are more current than ours, and obviously we might want to take that into account and ensure that we can, also communicate it as next steps. Michelle, did you want to say something on that or no?
I was jotting down notes. I told so sorry.
That's okay.
And I'm honestly, I'm thinking, so I'm trying to get my thoughts together.
Go ahead and think. I understand. When you're ready to say something, just let me know. I would imagine, Lieutenant Hubbard, that you are probably fairly aware of some of the other work that's going on across the country, or hopefully you got to see some stuff that was surprising and refreshing. I don't know.
I wouldn't say surprising. I do like it when things like this are legislated. It makes it it's just so much easier for us to use that as an example. So it's beyond it's hard for people like me to I can't call NYPD and say, hey, can I have your policy? It just doesn't work. But when they legislate things, it makes it a lot easier for us to get, and it's just a positive step for our entire country when we were able to pass things like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Deacon, I know you want to say something.
No, yeah. What he expressed is part of, the culture of law enforcement. We're very insular. So you're calling from across the country and you're a lieutenant and you want our policy. Yeah, who really are you? and who do you really work for? That's in the back of their minds and their heads. And you have to establish a case or something that can be verified and etc. And so, if you want him to be able to do that, we ought to get to the mayor and have the mayor write a letter to the New York mayor or the police commissioner and say, you're going to receive a call from such and such, and please cooperate with him. We're trying to follow in your footsteps, something euphemistic to make them feel good diplomatically. And then he can make that phone call and maybe he won't get the runaround, but somebody cold calls me and says, I'm Colonel, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I'm not listening to them until I can verify who they are. And that's just, policemen and women are just suspicious people.
We have to be, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I know that Mac comes from New York, so maybe the down and dirty, maybe he can get it. But
Mac, that's right, Mac Muir. could walk through those steps, and you know, we're going to get it because it's all public information, and that's a federal law, and it makes it public in government code 65, 62 something.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What were you guys trying to get?
Huh? Excuse me?
What were you trying to get?
The policy, New York policy on bias, not bias policing, but on racial profiling, correct?
Oh, I have it.
All right.
Well, go ahead, girl.
Sorry,
Share.
my head is in here, so I'll let you guys know. And I don't know if the commissioners had the opportunity. Deacon Lyles, I know you have not because you don't have the document. But for our methodology and research, we did look at New York's policy. We also looked at Anaheim's, Bakersfield, Bart's, Long Beach, Los Angeles, Riverside, San Diego, San Francisco, San Jose, Seattle, we also looked at Seattle's municipal code that governs bias-based policing, and several others. So what we were trying to do was we looked at a few from the East Coast that have really good ones, but then also looked at ones that were on the West Coast, understanding that California's legislation is a little, different. And those were the methodology. So we outlined all of the police jurisdictions, scholarly documents, and other information that we use to inform our recommendations. And I can definitely put the documents together in a zip file that we use for our methodology and send it to the group, if that would be helpful, particularly the policies to take a look at. And then I'm assuming, and I don't want to put the cart before the horse, that M19 will probably go to ad hoc, and this would help to get us a little bit quicker, closer there.
Yes. I will be requesting that we get the commission's feedback by March 25th in order to make sure that those recommendations are seen and lifted up as it relates to your policy recommendations. Go ahead.
I'll get my staff to put a zip file together and send that out to you guys by tomorrow, if that works.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's going to work quite well. Appreciate it. I am incredibly impressed at the more than 10 different sources that you used in order to, review M19. I'm not sure that we've had that expansive subject matter expert review for any of our policies that wide and airy. And so, Lieutenant Hubbard, back to you. I am interested in knowing, do you have any history on why there was never an MOR?
I don't. And actually, when it was said earlier, I immediately went to it. I was like, that can't be right. And sure enough, it's true. So I don't know
what I was talking
about. What's interesting is I was actually I was brand new in training. This is years ago. This is under Chief Wen, and we were doing the matrix and the manual of rules. So I guess it just never came up. That being said, I think the whole thing needs to be updated, but yeah, certainly we need to add that, but I unfortunately don't know the history.
May I? Okay, so may I ask a question? No MOR. If you don't have the MOR, then one could argue I can't be held accountable for failing to do what was, let's say, use the word appropriate and ethical, right? Because hey, you don't have nothing here that says. So again, this is the culture of Oakland Police Department. That doesn't surprise me. That's in fact a pattern in practice, and we're talking about, I don't know, 70 years. So of doing that. So consequently, our challenge is not just to writing the policy, is to cover every base so you can't drive a Mack truck through not being held accountable.
Yes.
Now, I don't like to see anybody get fired. No one.
Only
Because I
if
know
they
people
deserve
have
it.
houses, they got mortgages, they got children they got to send to private school, and you name it. They got their boat they got to get, get fixed, and you name it. They got all of that and save money for college and all of that. But if you don't fire people, you're not gonna have any accountability.
That's real talk, Deacon.
Period.
And I think very differently about firing people.
Okay.
I really feel like people fire themselves based upon their work
Okay.
they do or they don't do. And it's my responsibility as supervisor to address that. So they
Well,
fire themselves. I just do the paperwork.
You remember this name, Charlie Plummer, right?
Oh, yes. Oh,
Used
yes.
to be the sheriff at Alameda County.
Yes,
Well,
sir.
before he was a sheriff in Alameda County, he was a captain in the Berkeley Police Department, and of course, the chief of police in Hayward. And so I was a young officer in Berkeley, and he called me in after I, passed #1 on the sergeant exam. Called me in his office. He's a captain. He said, let me make one thing clear with you. If you see somebody doing something wrong, you have to discipline them. Remember, they did it and you didn't. I've never forgot it.
And as soon as you don't check them for having not done it, then you're complicit.
I'm complicit, and then the city is held financially liable.
That's
because
correct.
you are the vicarious responsibility as a sergeant, not taking failure to discipline or whatever. So the bottom line is that's what we're wrestling with in Oakland. The culture of, according to Judge Orrick, they have a culture of not wanting to hold people accountable. They say they're holding people accountable, but we have this technicality here. We have this MOR that wasn't written, and we don't know why.
So to your point, Deacon, and by the way, congratulations on having ranked #1 on the sergeant's exam. That's incredible, and it's so not surprising.
Otherwise, I wasn't getting promoted.
Well, look, #1
Period.
Ain't bad. But what I'm, if nobody knows the history, that's fine. I think that we don't do what we don't want to do. And it's like the commentary out there that says, we pay attention to the things that get measured. Well, it seemed like, based upon my understanding, that the MRR was the base of what we were going to ensure that we addressed through this ad hoc. Clearly, we're finding out that there are more things. But I want to also have us think about, when the commission did the use of force policy, and there were 3 commissioners that worked on that for about 7-8 months, crazy. One of the lead-ins for the commentary was underscoring the importance of life, and underscoring de-escalation.
Right.
So as we, begin to approach the narrative, I think it would be extremely important for us to address the history of racial profiling and how long it has been in place, and how challenging it is to obviate or ameliorate, not just from psyches, but people's implicit and explicit bias. Because even if you're trained, that means you're more knowledgeable. It doesn't necessarily mean that you change your way of moving.
Right.
Now, you hope so.
I was on both of those commissions, the use of force and body-worn camera. And we wanted to establish the fact that the reason why we're doing this and making these changes is because we've had this history before. And that created almost a nervous breakdown. It can't be done. It should not be put in the policy. We're not stating this. So there's no acknowledgement of past errors. Only way I know that you'll know not to do the mistakes that you did before is not make a monument of your mistakes, but make it so that we can easily research. This is what we want to, this is apophatic. This is what we're not going to do.
Correct.
The Bible is written that way. These are the things that were done that we're not going to do anymore. Correct. And then these are the things that God wants you to do. So there's a difference, apophotic and cataphotic. So you have to be able to say, look, yeah, there was a time when we lied on police reports. Yeah, there was a time that happened. And if we don't want it in our policy, we want to say, to make it positive, to make sure we don't make the mistakes of being absolutely truthful. We're doing this. If you don't do that, officers come in, they don't know anything about what went on before.
Yeah.
And it's only human for folks to do that. They just don't get it.
Right. And that is precisely why I thought that it was incredibly creative and thought-provoking that there was a narrative to kind of set.
You can thank Marsha Peterson for that.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you, Chair. We don't
She
know where
fought
you are,
that.
but we giving you all the love. But
She
you know,
really fought for that. She really
Yeah.
did.
no, I think it's incredible. And I just want to make sure that the excellence that's already been demonstrated, that we carry that on, because this is such a fundamental, ad hoc that is going to update and shift the trajectory that impacts all of us as citizens. Any thoughts by anybody else?
I have one for Lieutenant Hubbard.
Go ahead.
Have you noticed in your because I know you observed the character of the department and the behavior department. In your opinion, have you observed officers being more reticent in doing their job, not having the same enthusiasm or zeal about doing their job because they feel like they've been overcoached or over scrutinized?
It's all anecdotal.
Yeah.
That's
what I'm asking. I know there's no study
Yeah.
on it, so.
Yeah, it's all anecdotal. I think, it's a hard question to answer. I mean, a lot of it's not just the attitude of the officer; it's also just the efficiency. We're just inefficient in many ways. So what may be perceived as a work slowdown just has to do with, well, there's X, Y, and Z that I have to do, and it's just taking me longer. So it's an interesting subject that I want to look further into.
Okay.
Well, that was a great answer. We'll get deeper. We'll peel back the layers of that, because it's true. I mean, Oakland is bogged down with lots of detail and policy that we need, but it makes the job harder as well. And we want to ensure that people recognize how worth it is. And hopefully systems in 2025, but there's always going to be something, right?
Oh, yeah. And there's always something new every year in law enforcement.
Correct.
Correct. Police officers are lifelong students. Because the law is organic. It grows, and as people move and come and go, you have to change. So.
Yep, that is correct, and I appreciate that, and I hope that they appreciate that. It is 7:18. What I wanted to ask is what the pleasure of the ad hoc is. We need to identify when we will be meeting again. I do understand that we only get Deacon Lyles if we work on a Wednesday. So I want to ensure that no, look, busy people. But I'd like to find out what kind of cadence you all want to operate with. For me, I think it would be great if we could meet every 2 weeks. But we also then need to identify what our assignments are going to be. And I will ensure that the next time we meet that Darlene Flynn will be able to provide us an overview. And then we will also have the benefit of more information, because the policy that you're talking about, updating Lieutenant Hubbard, and then the MOR template, we want to start trying to figure out what we're going to do and where based upon the information that we have. I don't want us to rush, but I also don't want us to be so thoughtful that we don't actually get started. So the easier thing would be, when do we meet next? And I'd like to pose that we meet on the 20th, which would be 2 weeks from tonight, from 6 to 7:30. Does that work for everyone? Okay, Lieutenant Hubbard says yes. Deacon Lyles?
Yes, I already got it down here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ricardo, you good? Maybe? Okay, well, hopefully you can work that out.
I'm just gonna, yeah, it's our Fruitville NCPC meetings, and I'm the one that kind of goes to that to connect all our programming, but I could maybe get another representative to represent us there.
If that's possible, obviously we would very much appreciate it. If it's not, you and I'll have a great excuse to get together and just kind of summarize. Michelle, I know that we may not be able to have you at all of our ad hoc meetings. Obviously, the first couple I think would be incredibly important. Do you think that you can make that March 20th?
I was on another screen looking at my schedule, because you know I have to my trusty schedule.
I know,
I
you're everywhere.
I'm I'm blocking it off. I just blocked it off.
If you can't make that, why don't we just go ahead and say that the next meeting is March 20th from 6 to 7:30, and we will appreciate whomever can make it. I will also be reaching out to a few more community members, because this kind of the police search and all of our different meetings, we didn't really get this announced strongly. I think it was one time in a commission meeting, and then I mentioned it during the retreat, which was on a Sunday, you know. Yes, Michelle?
Like, I ain't even saying it. I think and just look, I'm like Commissioner Miss Regina, the Chair Emeritus.
Whatever comes out, fine.
Right. I'm like, I think it would be helpful for us to maybe meet one more time as this group to outline objectives first, just so that we have a clear kind of trajectory and we can stay on track as to what we have expectations and outputs and maybe deliverables, so that it's clear before we add a few more people in. I like, order systems. I think everybody on the call knows me. So if we can kind of do that first, so there's alignment there, and then kind of bring some folks in so that they can jump into a conversation that we have already framed with objectives that we already have, I think that would be helpful. But I can defer to the rest of the group. I just know me, when we have a ton of people in, everybody kind of talks about tons of different things, and we never really get the work done timely.
Mm-hmm. I think that that makes really good sense. Is everybody else in agreement with that?
So we would meet on the 13th as opposed to the 20th? Are you suggesting that?
Can we meet on well, I think what she's saying is, before we let anybody else come in, let us define our
Okay.
scope
Sorry.
and our timeline and those kinds of things. So that
apologize.
can be March 20th.
Okay.
Is everybody good with that? Okay, I'm seeing some head nodding.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So and well, we're almost at the end. So who would like to make some suggestions? I think what might be helpful is for Lieutenant Hubbard, for you to send us an MOR that, the subject matter doesn't necessarily have to be really, really close to racial profiling, but if it could, that'd be great. I just want to have a template of sorts that we can, begin to think about. And then we will also, part of the reason that I love you, Michelle, is because you are very much about order. I have a tendency to be kind of an octopus and move in a few different arenas. So would you like to make some suggestions to help move us along?
Yeah, I'll draft up kind of a agenda, and maybe reach out to each one of you kind of individually to pick your brain and see if I can get maybe 5-10 minutes on a call. Lieutenant Hubbard and I have standing meetings anyway, just so there's alignment there, and provide any supplemental documentation and send that out prior to the meeting on the 20th. Maybe that would be helpful. I know Ricardo and I, like, you owe me a one-on-one, sir. I know you're busy and famous out here in these streets, but can't get a little time, sir.
Okay, so we want you to prioritize that before you even prioritize meeting with me, okay?
Yes, ma'am. But no, I'll
Got
set up.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. So we have March 20th is our next meeting. Between that time, Michelle is going to draft an agenda, and we will also get some supplemental documentation that we can review in advance of March 20th. So as long as that information can come out, you know, by this next week, that'd be really great.
May I ask the question,
Sure.
Regina? This is actually for Michelle. I got the administrative guide here from New York City. Would that be equal to a MOR in Oakland, or would it be? It would not. Okay.
Okay,
No.
would you go ahead and share with us why not, or what that is, so we can
We
all
can
be educated
pull
at the same
that,
time?
and I don't know, Chief Hubbard, if you have it right there with you, like the policy, like a MOR, I think you have to kind of see it the way that they outline the manual rules, and there's like a manual rules document that we have, and if Chief Hubbard has it kind of close by, maybe we can disseminate it to our folks on the call. That might be helpful, so that you can kind of take a look at what an administrative policy or a departmental general order or training bulletin looks like versus an MOR.
Well, I'm less concerned about you know, how they look as opposed to purpose. I just want to make sure if you got a general order or administrative guide, then what is the difference between that and an MOR? The manual of rules, what does the manual rules do that a general order does not do? What are the differences?
So I can best describe it as an MOR would be the vehicle code section, and there's a number attached, and it's like, okay, you broke the law by doing this, but if you want to know, okay, what exactly did I do wrong, then you refer back to the manual to see the actual description of the violation. So it's just more, it's a separate document that just outlines an explanation more. Yeah.
And the purpose for not having it in one document is a way of what?
It was a style preference that was made many years ago, but I like efficiency. So if we can merge those two things together, I think that would be great.
I'm sorry for asking a rhetorical question, but on other thing I've argued, if you only see one document and you don't know why the document is there or why the purpose of the document, you're less apt to adhere to it. But if you have to go to another one to read it, it's a way of keeping the public, I think, uninformed.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. And this is one of many examples of how some of our policies are just spread out. And it's hard for officers. You know, they're dealing with real-time scenarios, and they have to look up a policy, and they have to look at 10 different places to find the answer. And it's just not healthy.
And I'm suggesting to you, well, I shouldn't suggest like I know, I'm gonna suggest to you like I'm suspicious. I'm wondering if that's not strategic.
If it's intent, we even, and Chief Hubbard will tell you, we were sitting there saying that what we should do is, oh, that's so nice. Sorry, the Miss Gutierrez. So what we recommended too was we should outline in the DGO what manual of rule it corresponds with.
You
like,
shall see.
Because like if you do not adhere to this departmental general order, that is a violation of MOR, boom, 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 which coincides with this. To your point, because as we started doing research, and even sometimes there would be a training bulletin or special order that is noticed in the departmental general order that we couldn't find. So we would have to reach out to policy and publication and say, hey, do you have this? Can I can I get this? Because I can't find it. So that's one reason why some of our reviews take a little
And could
while.
that be a defense for a person who said, look, I did this, but I didn't know about that?
Or why this and not that, right? And
Mhm.
Chief Hubbard and I have observed, well, is it, is it an administrative instruction violation, or is it an MOR violation? Is it this, or does it fit nicely in that? We've had several robust, very passionate conversations in different forms about the classification of certain potential misconduct allegation violations. So I hear you, Deacon.
I appreciate that very much, and I want to acknowledge Ms. Gutierrez, who's a resident of Oakland and wants to be involved in the group. I did send a direct message saying that we would follow up with her to ask her assistance after March 20th, once we have clarified some of our objectives and timelines.
Did you guys receive the email that I sent?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. All right.
Thank you. So
there was a misspelling, I'm sorry, in Ricardo's email, so I just forwarded it to him.
okay, thank you.
Sorry about that, Ricardo.
That's okay. We will. It's all love. So it is 7:30 right now. If there are no other comments, we are going to go back and forth with some emails by March 13th and meet right here on this same bat channel, March 20th from 6 to 7:30. Is everybody good with that?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, I have been loving the robust conversation, the discussion, the expertise, and the history. And I'm hoping that those citizens that have been watching this meeting are also similarly stimulated. And I look forward to continuing to work with you and getting us an MOR, an updated policy, a letter to post, and any other thing we think of. Some impact into the training, all of that. So thank you very much for your time, and want to let you go to your families, and we'll see you again soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
all very
everyone.
much.
Have a good
night.
evening.
Okay, bye-bye.